Molaram is played by Amrish Puri. He is very, very good in this film. I guess he was a very famous actor over in India, right? Amish Puri was I think, very good in this performance. I think it was a little bit over the top, but I think that's what it was going for. Very daunting.
He ensures that Indy, Willie, and Short Round are captured. He makes Indy drink the blood of Kali, or whatever it is.
Yeah, he pretty much tries to make him consume this blood that'll turn him, as it was described, like he's in a nightmare, but he's not dead, but he's also not alive.
And he can't wake up.
Yeah. And he pours it, and he spits it back out. Molaram has a big henchman in this movie.
Oh, yeah. He's a big dude.
Which I'm sure you know is played by the same guy who was the big Nazi henchman at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I did not know that, no.
And he makes an appearance in all 3 films. I can't remember exactly. I think he plays 2 people in this movie. And then he makes an appearance in the 3rd film. So I think he's one of the stunt choreographers.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So Indy spits the blood out, and then this is another really dark scene. I mean, pretty much everything from here on out is dark, but not only do they whip Indy as punishment, they whip Short Round. And Indy's like taking his beating, and he looks over and he's like, "Leave him alone, you bastards." But yeah, I don't want to see Short Round get hurt. That makes me sad. And then they finally get Indy to drink the blood of Kali, and then there's this weird scene where Indy is laying on this table, like surrounded by candles, and he's like writhing in agony and yelping until he finally wakes up, and he's like does this really grim smile, and he's like part of the cult now. It's really, really bizarre and weird.
It is strange. I don't necessarily know what they were going for here. I don't know why, what the kind of end goal was, but it inevitably just leads to him being brainwashed. And he is the one who's attempting to also do the sacrificing.
Yes, they put Willie in the cage next, and Molaram has Indy perform the sacrifice. Now, I always wondered this as a child. Now I think it's just because they couldn't do this to Kate Capshaw. Why did they rip the heart out of the male human sacrifice, but not rip out Willie's heart?
That's a good question.
I always wondered that until it just occurred to me, well, she's the main lead. They can't rip her heart out. But
that is true. I mean, plot, what do they call it? Plot armor?
Plot armor, yeah.
It also could very well just be that, and I'm just speculating here, but the other guy who had his heart taken out was a actual sacrifice, and this was more of just a punishment thing.
I'm going to go with that. I like that.
Just an idea.
So they put Indy in charge of overseeing this, punishment. Meanwhile, Short Round has been enslaved, and he's busy trying to break free from his chains, which he does successfully. And he shows up just in time to save the day. And it turns out all you need to do to get somebody out of this trance is burn them with fire.
Definitely seems a little bit of a lazy writing for that.
That's all you have to do. You have to walk up to Indiana Jones with a torch in your hand, say, "Indy, I love you," and then burn him. And then he's back.
It worked. And that leads to that great shot. I don't know why I always love this shot where he, I guess, kind of lunges over towards Short Round and then grabs him. He says, "I'm okay, kid," and winks at him.
Yep.
I think that's a great shot.
That is a good shot.
It shows, obviously, like, now that, it establishes he's out of the trance, and that he still has all his memory and everything. But I think it's a great, just like, these two are clearly just good buddies.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted more Short Round in the Dial of Destiny. But I'll save my rant for the Dial of Destiny session when we record it. But yeah, Indy and Willie and Short Round decide to leave, but Indy says, we're all going to leave, implying that he's going to go rescue the children. So they go down into the tunnels, and this is my favorite shot of the movie, where Indy is just staring down this overseer, and he just looks so intimidating. I love that. I love that shot. He takes out the overseer, and then they start getting they get the keys out, and they start freeing the children. The children run out into the light, and that's when the voodoo begins. Although we had some voodoo earlier in the film, we just didn't talk about it. But there's a voodoo doll of Indy, and in this particular scene, the young Maharaja, who is also under the spell of Kali, is
young as in like Short Round young,
a child.
Yes,
the child Maharaja is just stabbing the voodoo doll with a little knife that was in his
it's great physical
turban.
Great physical reaction from Harrison Ford every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very believable. Ultimately, Short Round again saves the day by overpowering the Maharaja, taking the little blade out of the voodoo doll, and then Indy just starts laying right into the big heavy,
which is, I think, their way of, trying to keep a little bit of consistency with, obviously, who happens to be the same actors fighting from the last movie, but there was that big hand-to-hand combat scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
And both big heavies in both films die horrible, painful deaths.
Yeah, very, very gory still. It's just, I remember the first time I watched that movie when I was a kid, and I was like, whoa, that was gross.
Yeah.
Also, I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, you're good.
We also have not mentioned why they're in an entire mining shaft right now, what the entire purpose of this was.
True.
I never realized why they were down there, and I guess I never thought about it until watching it this most recent time. I don't know why, just never thought to really understand why. But it turns out that the Shankara stones that he is after, that Mola Ram has taken, are 3 of 5.
There's 5 of them. Yep.
And there are 2 that have gone missing, and he said through 3,000 years of war, that they have gone missing throughout that time, and that they were, I guess they were buried or they were lost somewhere in this area, and that's why they have all the children pretty much enslaved to mine for those stones.
Right. Yeah, never occurred to me either, to be quite honest. I
figured it was just like a like the Austin Powers Dr. Evil lair. Like it was just the lair that they were in.
Yeah, I never bothered to think about why the kids were enslaved to begin with. But yeah, they're looking for the last 2 stones.
Yep.
We get a really cool chase sequence on a mining cart, which I think we mentioned earlier that it was also meant for Raiders of the Lost Ark and just didn't fit into the film.
Yeah, it was kind of, I don't know how big it was supposed to be in the movie in Raiders. I don't know if it was supposed to be as significant, but essentially they said there's just too much to put in the movie, and that was one thing that they still wanted to get to, so they kind of put it on the back burner.
Well, it's a great scene in Temple of Doom. One of the highlights for me in a film that, I'm not really crazy about, but
which they built an entire track.
They did.
For this sequence, which is incredible because it's a very physical sequence. Mm-hmm. I mean, it looks dangerous. Like it's as much as like a lot of these sets clearly have a lot of, fluff to them that make them, that they're not real. This looks very dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's impressive that they actually did that. But it still is a very fun sequence, and it's kind of the pairing with what I had said in my favorite sequence in Raiders was the Nazi truck sequence.
Yeah.
So this is very much paired with that.
Yeah, you're right. This is the truck sequence of Temple of Doom.
all three of these films have very similar structures. They have a great cold open. They have bits of exposition in small parts, but they still add in different aspects instead of just exposition, which is obviously a very important thing that they do. Then there's obviously the build. It's very traditional storytelling, with the big chase sequence at the end. I think all three movies, maybe not as much Last Crusade, but all three movies are very structured similarly, and it works because the pacing works.
Yeah, as we've mentioned before, Steven Spielberg is a master of pacing in at least, if not all of his films, then in the Indiana Jones films, for certain.
This is, I think, one of the funniest parts of the movie. The brakes on the minecart, the handle snaps while Short Round is trying to pull it.
I totally forgot about this.
And as this is as the chase sequence is happening with Mulharam's henchmen, we see Mulharam with some more of his people, and I guess there's this entire thing of water, this entire tank, and I guess that's their water source while they're down in the mines, and we see them tearing it down to flood the mine shaft. While this is happening, the brakes are gone on the mine cart, and they're about to crash, so he needs to get in front and prop his left foot on the wheel, which I can only imagine, because I know those minecart wheels are sharp. They're not like a wheel,
Right.
That his foot would not have probably gone in smoke. It probably would have just gone off his body. That I can only imagine that would have been more horrible than it was. But it's very funny where he jumps off, and they stop the cart right at the last second, of course, and he gets off and his foot's on fire, and just smoke billowing, and he goes, "I need water, 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 water." And then that's as soon as the flood starts coming through, and then he realizes he doesn't want that much water.
Doesn't he say water again? Like, water!
Yeah.
Water!
Yeah. And he's pointing at it, and he's running away, short of breath. And that's where they end up going through a few more tunnels to get out of there, and ending up on another great set piece, a cliff, where it's just a short edge, and Willie and Short Round end up on one side, and Indy ends up on the other, as they proceed to have to climb up off while the water is just spewing out, and then we actually get to the best sequence of this movie. My favorite sequence of this movie.
The bridge?
The bridge sequence. There's so many fun little things here. Obviously, Willie and Short Round kind of split off. Their duo is very good at this point. They're working great together. They split off, and they head towards the bridge as Indy heads a different direction I don't know if he's trying to get different ground or something. And this is one single long bridge that has to be 500 yards long. It's very long, absurdly long. Short Round gets on the bridge, and he's trying to get Willie to come across with him so they can get to the other side, and he keeps jumping on the wood. He's like, "See, it's okay," and then he falls. And I just got a great crack up from that, because he was just so comedic at it. But he is obviously okay. But then we see the scale of how high up they are.
Yeah.
With a bunch of alligators in the water. It's still an impressive scene. All those alligator shots that they do, they use real alligators that they filmed from Florida too.
Right, yeah.
When in doubt, go to Florida for any kind of gators. But I also love this where Indy is going in a different direction from them, and he's not part of this, but he runs into a bunch of the henchmen, and this is a great callback. This is hilarious. He runs into two of the guys, and they're two swordsmen. And they start doing some tricks, and Indy kind of shrugs it off, and he's about to pull out his gun, much like the first film, and just shoot the guys. But he's got no pistol on him. He lost his pistol. And it's a very funny callback to the first film.
I actually have an issue with that callback. And it's so silly, but it's a prequel.
That is very true.
It's a prequel.
But that was more of just for the audience, I think.
Yeah,
it was just a little wink.
That's why I said it's silly, but
yeah. You are right. I still loved it. I think it was a hilarious little bit, but you are right. That was, I guess it wouldn't make much sense, but it also could just be he just was going to shoot him either way.
We'll go with that.
Yeah, but no, you are right. So essentially, he gets to the bridge, and Willie and Short Round get across it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Mola Ram is on the other side, and this is just, I mean, this is part of like Spielberg's talent of building tension. Pretty much like from Jaws, he knew how to gain this kind of like intense build for any type of sequence that he needs, and he showed that through all his movies. And this is where it really shines through, where John Williams' score kind of almost cuts out.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really use it that strong when Indy ends up in the middle of the bridge. And you hear, I mean, obviously there's still a little bit of score, but it's really a low tempo kind of drumming that's going on. Kind of similar to in the actual temple itself when they were doing a sacrifice. There was kind of that lower drumming. Although, you could definitely tell where he got Duel of the Fates from. I don't know if you noticed that when he was doing the John Williams' score in the sacrifice sequence was
with the choir?
it was very close to Duel of Fates.
I got to listen to it again. Okay.
It was pretty funny, but I digress. He pretty much like cuts a lot back, and it's just a great scene right here. Cuts the bridge in half.
Right.
Doesn't know where to go. Cuts it in half. A little bit of dueling on the split bridge. Willie and Short Round, I guess, make it up to the top.
Can you explain to me, because I never have been able to figure it out, how did Indy defeat Mola Ram? There's a whole moment where Indy starts telling him, you betrayed Shiva. And I never understood what that meant or why he was telling him that.
I think that's very much a reference to him using... He uses this religion as kind of his backboard to do this stuff. And he obviously uses it it relies on it to, help convince these people, and then ends up brainwashing them in a different way. But that's kind of what I see from that.
Okay.
Where he's actually just betraying the religion itself.
Okay. It's an explanation, so...
And I could be dead wrong too, but
no,
you never know.
I buy it.
They pretty much have this struggle on the bridge. Indy's got his pouch with him where he keeps all of his artifacts.
The stones are in there.
He's got the stones in there at this time. And even as a kid, I remember thinking this was a little odd. Why would they... Because they light up when all three of them are together.
Correct.
Right? And they, I guess, produce a lot of heat. Why... How was he able to carry that the entire time, is my question.
That's a good question.
And clearly they produce a lot of heat because they burst into flames and burn through his pouch. They burn his pouch and pretty much fall down into the water. And Mola Ram catches one of them and pretty much burns his hand. Mola Ram does have a pretty nasty death here, though.
Eaten by alligators.
Yeah, I guess once he catches the stone, Indy just kicks him off, right?
Yep. He just falls.
And I remember my brother and I always pointing this out and always laughing at it when we were kids, was when he's falling off, his bald head scrapes up against the entire wall, and I'm just like, that's got to be the most painful part of the entire fall. And then we see the gators eating his robes, eating him presumably, and at this point is, I guess, when the British Army eventually show up, right?
Right.
And you notice the homage that they paid there was Mola Ram's men were on one side of the canyon, or I guess the canyon, and they were all in red. And then the British troops show up and they're all in blue, bright blue, and it was clearly a George Lucas call for the evil and good, the Jedi and the Sith.
I've never picked up on that.
I never did too, but as I was watching it this time, it was so prominent because the blue that they use is like a very bright baby blue. So it's very like supposed to be in your face. And the red is very dark and it's meant to be Obviously looking a lot like the lightsabers that the Jedi and the Sith fought back
Very
and forth
cool.
with.
Very cool.
But yeah, and then it's pretty much wrapping up the whole film.
He's a hero.
He is a hero by the end of it. Yes, he is, because all the children are returned. Gets back to the village. All the kids are there. Great shot. Still gave me goosebumps this time of Indy coming up and all the children just sprinting down.
Yeah,
it's
great.
such a good shot. Finally, Willie and Indy share a very passionate kiss in front of the entire town, and it's a very heartwarming scene. And that's pretty much the rolling credits part of the movie.
It does make me wonder what happened to Willie, because again, this takes place before Raiders of the Lost Ark.
It only takes place a year before too, right?
That's true. He and Willie don't last long.
Does not sound like it. Again, I mean, I think the whole point of him is he's supposed to be like James Bond, a kind of a playboy-esque, suave guy, where he probably just moves on from different women for a while until he finds Marion in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yep. And then there's, well, we'll save all that for another session. But, you gave Raiders of the Lost Ark a 10 out of 10. So
You're gonna hate me. I also give this one a 10 out of 10.
Okay, no,
I give the first 3 films in this series a 10 out of 10.
Oh, spoiler for Last Crusade.
Wow.
Okay. What did I give Raiders? 9, I think. I have to give this one. I want to say a 6, but I'm going to be generous. Because it's Indiana Jones, I'll give it a 7. It's my least favorite Indiana Jones film. That doesn't mean it's a bad film. It's just, I've said this a little bit earlier. To me, it lacks the spirit of Indiana Jones, or what Indiana Jones means to me, which is, adventure, some comedy, but just a good adventure story. And while there is certainly adventure in this film, it's too dark. And I'm not normally one to say that, a movie is too dark. I like dark movies, but to me, this just takes it to a whole new level, especially considering the fact that none of the other 4 films are anywhere near as dark as this one. But again, there are reasons why I enjoy it very much. Short Round is my favorite character in the entire franchise. My favorite scene in the franchise, possibly my favorite scene in the franchise, is the spike chamber and the dialogue between Indy and Willie. Yeah. So you know what? It's not a hesitant 7. It's a positive 7.
Well, that's better than a 2. That's for sure.
Oh, it was never going to be that low.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've said this movie's not perfect. It's got plenty of flaws, of which I don't think that the first and the third have. I don't think they have that type of flaw that this movie does. And as we've talked about pretty much throughout this entire movie, it is a lot of the tone. I think Willie is a character in this movie that if you put Karen Allen in, I think would have drastically improved the film. And I don't think that Kate Capshaw's a poor actor. I think that Karen Allen would have just brought in something a little different.
What's interesting is that if Karen Allen had been in the film, it would have had to have been a sequel.
Not necessarily, because they had already known each other plenty in Raiders.
But this is only a year beforehand, though.
That is true, and it was a
while.
while.
I guess they could have adjusted the year, made it even earlier. But yeah.
Again, still my favorite intro of all the movies. That's just a killer intro.
It's a great intro. Terrible title shot, but that's okay.
And it's the first movie to actually use Indiana Jones in the title.
That's right.
With that type of I don't know what you call that.
The font?
Yeah, I don't know what font.
It's also the only Indiana Jones film to use that font in the title.
That's right.
The rest use the Raiders font.
That's right. Yeah, which, I think it works a little bit better just as the Raiders font.
I agree.
I think it's just a little bit too silly to show on the screen with action happening. But
Oh, so that's why they covered it up.
yeah, because they thought it was silly.
Because they thought it was silly. That's why they put Kate Capshaw in front of the words.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what happened to Willie in between Temple of Doom and Raiders. I know why she's not in the story anymore. Because she ended up with Steven Spielberg, not Indiana Jones.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, they did get married 5 years down the line, wasn't it?
I don't know the exact timeline, but I'm just going with that. Steven Spielberg married Willie Scott or Kate Capshaw in real life.
If you watch the documentary about this film, there is a very clear flirtatious attitude they have towards each other in the movie.
Very, very.
So much so that I thought that they were, before I knew when they got married, I thought they were married very recently after this movie. But it was, I think, about 5 years after. I think he was still married at the time.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that. I can't prove. I don't know if that's true or not. It's still a fun ride, though. It's a fun movie with a lot of stuff that is much darker. But I look at that intro. I look at the minecart scene. I look at a lot of the action that they use, and I still think it's a very fun movie.
I mean, it's definitely worth watching, and I said this in our Raiders review, and I'll say it now. If you're watching this and you haven't seen the actual movie, like, why are you watching this? Go watch the movie, and then come back here and watch this. Also, if you guys like the fedora, leave me a comment. I got to decide if I'm going to keep wearing this or not. Leave a comment. Thank you. I think we've covered basically everything about the film.
I think so. I will say one reason, again, why I think I'm a little bit more nostalgic about this movie. This is just my last point. I remember, as I've said before, this is pretty much the series that I always watched when I was a kid. It was pretty much as long as I could watch movies. And I remember I was one of those kids that loved cartoons, always watched cartoons on Saturday morning. But when I was growing up, I was never allowed to watch any kind of TV or anything on Sunday morning. We didn't go to church or anything, but you just didn't watch anything on TV. We weren't allowed to. I think doing homework or something like that. We had just come back from a trip, and my brother and I were watching Raiders of the Lost Ark on the drive home, and I think we were coming back from Florida. We were at Orlando, the Walt Disney World there.
Okay, cool.
And we did a whole drive, and we were watching, and I really was so excited to watch Temple of Doom. And I think it was the first time I'd ever gotten the opportunity to watch it, and I wasn't allowed to. And we got back on a Saturday night, and it was my parents breaking because I was so upset. And they said, tomorrow morning, first thing you can watch Temple of Doom.
Nice.
And so that was always, and I always remembered that memory, and it was always very funny to me. But that's probably a lot of the nostalgia stemming from.
No, I can see it.
Yeah.
That's a great childhood memory. How old were you?
Oh, I must have been 6.
Okay.
Maybe. Somewhere around there.
In your formative years.
That's right. I wasn't as well articulated about a film like this then, but I still had a lot of fun with it.
Very cool. All right. Well, Nick and I will be covering the rest of the Indiana Jones films, so stay tuned for our review and breakdown of The Last Crusade coming soon. All right. Thank you guys for attending this Saga session. We hope to see you again soon. Take care.